Hello, Steel City fam. Welcome back to SCM MCS, Mysterious Crime Stories, with your host T-Rex. We have another edition for you this week. This is the story of the Grimes sisters who were murdered in 1956. 15-year-old Barbara and 13-year-old Patricia. Avid Elvis Presley fans. They just wanted to go to a movie and watch his latest release, Love Me Tender. Unfortunately, they never made it back home. Even Elvis pleaded before the media for the girls to return home to their mother. Let's get into the story. On December 28th, 1956, two teenage girls, 13-year-old Patricia Grimes and her 15-year-old sister Barbara, left their home after having dinner to see Elvis Presley's latest film, Love Me Tender. The Grimes sisters were obsessed with Elvis and were planning on watching a double feature. They promised their mother that they would be home by midnight. The girls made it to the theater and were seen by many friends, including Dorothy Weinhardt. Dorothy sat behind the girls during the first feature, and she left when it was over. Before she left, she saw Patricia and Barbara near the concession stand. She was the last to see them alive. When midnight came and passed, Loretta Grimes, the girl's mother, sent two of the older children to the bus stop to wait for their sister's arrival. The girls didn't get off any of the buses. By 2 a.m., the girls still had not come home. So at that point, the Grimes family contacted police officers. An investigation and search of the area began immediately. As the people of Chicago chimed in to help the Grimes family reunite with the girls, many unreliable and ultimately empty leads poured in. They ranged from seeing the girls after the movie listening to Elvis Presley records in a department store to seeing the girls leaving the bus station out of Chicago. Another friend of Patricia Grimes claimed to have received a phone call and hearing Patricia's voice on the other line. Ultimately, the police department assumed that Patricia and Barbara Grimes must have run away to Nashville, Tennessee, in hopes of meeting Elvis Presley. It was the only explanation that they had. This conclusion gained so much traction that even Elvis Presley was aware of it and addressed the girls over the radio in a message. He was encouraging them to go home. And he stated, "If you are good Presley fans, you'll go home and ease your mother's worries." At the time Elvis spoke this message directly to his young fans, the girls were already dead. Their bodies were discovered by Leonard Prescott, who was driving on German Church Road on an errand when he spotted two flesh-colored things that he mistook for mannequins. They were actually the bodies of Barbara and Patricia. Their bodies lay naked in the snow. Autopsy reports later showed that the girls died within a few hours of having gone missing. The dinner they ate was still sitting in their stomachs. Their death was ruled as simply murder. And secondarily, exposure to the elements. The girls were buried by their older sister, Leona Freck, who died 2 years prior. The Grimes murders are still unsolved. Multiple people were questioned and arrested. Then there was the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott, a 15-year-old who was murdered a year later. She was discovered naked, similar to the Grimes sisters. A man named Charles Leroy Melquist was convicted of the murder, but never the murder for the Grimes girls. Another suspect, Walter Kranz, who said he dreamt of a location of the girls' bodies, was also brought in for questioning. There was one person who confessed, Edward Lee Benny Bedwell, who just happened to look like Elvis, and claimed to have met the girls and spent a week with the girls and a friend named Frank. He and his friend Frank and the girls, he claimed, went on a bender. His story did not line up with the autopsy reports that the girls did not have any alcohol in their system, and that one of the girls had had sex. It was also undetermined if it was consensual or not. In his confession, Benny claimed that his friend knocked the girls out, stripped them, and left them on the side of the road after they turned down the boys' sexual advances. Despite the discrepancies, Benny later rescinded his confession, claiming the police officers had bribed and beaten him for a confession. Benny walked free. The Chicago Police Department promised Loretta Grimes that they would not close the case of murder for Barbara and Patricia until they found who had killed her girls. They tried, but they never found the killer. Though the disappearance and murder of the Grimes girls went cold for many years, author and former criminal investigator Ray Johnson may have cracked it open. Johnson claims that the similar incident with Bonnie Lee Scott, which took place in Addison, Illinois, may have been connected to the murders of Barbara and Patricia. The man that was responsible for Bonnie's murder supposedly made a phone call to Loretta Grimes and bragged about getting away with the murders of Scott and both of the Grimes sisters. Johnson asserts that information about this call went unpublished by the media back in the 1950s, and also that the non-lethal marks found on the Grimes sisters' bodies around the abdomen were very similar to the marks that were found on the body of Scott. Lastly, Johnson claims to have spoken to a third girl who was abducted with the Grimes sisters, but escaped. She was 14 years old at the time and did not come forward out of fear. Melquist was convicted for the murder of Bonnie Lee Scott and sentenced to 99 years in prison. He served 11 years. He was then released. He later married and had 2 children of his own. Melquist was never officially implicated in the murders of the Grimes sisters. As I stated, the Grimes case remains unsolved. However, a Facebook group administered by Johnson called Help Solve Chicago's Grimes Sisters Murder. Today, it has roughly 1,300 members. If anyone knows anything about this old, cold case, please contact your local authorities. We would still love to bring the murderer of the Grimes girls to justice. Thank you again for joining me for yet another edition of SCM MCS Mysterious Crime Stories. I am your host, T-Rex. Please join me again next week.